All they knew was that Allan had gone missing and then his body had been found and he had been badly mutilated and beaten. But the reality of all of it, it was so much worse. For starters, Allan's cause of death was not something that we often see or even talk about. He died from major blood loss, and not from a stab wound or a gunshot wound, but from internal injuries to the lower part of his body. And I don't want to get overly graphic, but I know you know where I'm going with that. The injury had come from a large object, which is believed to have caused internal tears, which then unfortunately led to the extreme blood loss, which is really, just to be quite honest, a fancy way of saying that he was killed because he was unfortunately sexually assaulted until it physically killed him. But that wasn't the only thing that the investigators were able to identify and theorize. The detectives believed that Allan had been kidnapped, more than likely by those very people who had offered him a ride when he was hitchhiking. So when they got the tox report back, in Allan's system, they found something called chloral hydrate, which at the time was commonly found in a prescription drug called Noctec. And Noctec was advertised as being a very harmless drug for people with sleep issues. But like any drug, if it's overused, it could easily knock someone out and keep them knocked out for an extended period of time. During the post-mortem exam and autopsy, the examiner was also able to identify that before Allan's body was dumped, it was washed. Someone intentionally cleaned him. And we can assume that this was done by the perpetrator or perpetrators so that they could get rid of any DNA evidence that could potentially have been left on the body and then later traced back to them. But very calculated, very strategic. And lastly, we have to talk about how the body was found. The investigators believe that Allan's body was dumped post-mortem, which honestly is really, really unfortunate because if it was done while he was still alive, it probably would have been a pretty quick and painless death, especially compared to what had really killed him. The area where Allan's body was found was underneath the bridge, and there was a very narrow strip of water underneath the bridge, which is where the investigators believe Allan's killer had intended to dump his body. But because the part where the water flowed through was so narrow, the killer missed the mark, and the body ended up hitting the ground near the water. Which again, that all makes sense given how mangled Allan's remains were and how contorted all of his legs and arms were. And it's kind of scary to think that if his remains had landed in the water, they could have ended up anywhere. Or maybe they never would have even been found, who knows? So the investigators began treating Allan's murder as a homicide, and they concluded that what was done to Allan, it seemed way too personal to be done by a random stranger. However, not everybody was agreeing with that. Maybe he had gotten into the car with random strangers because he was hitchhiking just down the road and, again, was completely normal to do back then. I mean, it's also what he and his friend had set out to do. Or maybe he had gotten into the car that he was last seen getting into because he knew the driver or passengers. The detectives were looking for anyone that Allan was in contact with in his personal life, whether it was close friendships, acquaintances, whatever. It did not matter. Specifically, they were looking for any of those people who drove the same kind of vehicle that he was last seen getting into. I mean, that should be fairly easy to sort through, right? Well, it really wasn't. But the investigators quickly stuck a pin in that search because just 2 days after Allan's body was found, the detectives received an anonymous call from someone who apparently had a tip. And this tip wasn't something more minuscule, like I saw Allan with this person the day before his murder, or Allan and this person didn't get along.